are zooming in are from FUV, and I'm excited to, at least now that the mic is on, to call out one person in the audience, and that is Tommy Valali, who is really the heart and soul of Fulbright University of Vietnam. So students, you probably can't see him, but he is sitting here. In Tommy's other role, he is my he's my partner in crime sidekick, and he has to go to every Vietnamese studies event here at Columbia University. I know. You keep it up, you're going to also be here all the time. So I was saying, for all those you can't hear over Zoom, I rarely read introductions, but I do want to do so in this case, because these two women sitting here in the front, two of the strongest Vietnamese American women that I know, who really exemplify, as we were saying, profiles of leaders. Are, I feel very lucky because I also call them friends. So on top of being amazing role models for me as a slightly younger Vietnamese American woman, they really blazed the path for us within the community. So I'm going to read their bios. So just bear with me for this moment. So Naja, Pham Lockwood, I also forgot to mention, in addition to being the producing fellow, she is a member of the senior advisory board of Vietnamese studies here at Columbia. Naja has executive produced multiple documentary and narrative films focusing on social justice issues, including 76 Days, Try Harder, Coming Home Again, Gook, and Crisis from Syria. She's the founder of Rise Media Ventures, which both supports stories of diverse stories, and an investor of Impact Partner Films, which has financed the Academy Award-winning documentary Icarus, as well as Won't You Be My Neighbor and Audrey and Daisy. She financed and co-produced The First Days with StoryCorps, which is a collaboration between StoryCorps and PBS American Experience, which aimed to collect, preserve, and celebrate the stories of Vietnamese American refugees and Vietnam veterans throughout America. She is currently developing and producing stories of the Vietnamese diaspora with the themes of war, identity, and trauma. Naja served on the Sundance Utah Advisory Board and partnered with Sundance Institute to build and fund the Sundance Screenwriters Fellowships for Asian American filmmakers. She currently serves on the board of the Utah Film Commission, the Center for Asian American Media, CAM. Is Don Young here?
No, he'll be here.
He'll be in a second. Later. Okay. Born in Vietnam, Naja immigrated to Massachusetts during the fall of Saigon. She was the first Vietnamese American to be appointed by Mayor Willie Brown and Mayor Gavin Newsom to be Arts Commissioner of San Francisco, with a focus on community and diversity and the expansion and capital campaign development of the Asian Art Museum. Throughout Naja's life, there's always been a commitment to social justice and making sure the voices of the underrepresented, the minority, and the oppressed are always heard. Naja graduated with a BA from Boston University and an MBA from Harvard Business School. We forgive you for that. And as I said, she is currently a producing fellow for our Asian Action Series and a member of our senior advisory board. And she is also a member of the global advisory board of Fulbright University, Vietnam. Lan Cao, Lan Cao, was born in Saigon, Vietnam, when it was called Saigon, and came to the United States as a refugee in 1975. As a child who grew up in war, she found comfort in the stories of 1001 Arabian Nights, fascinated by the idea that the narrator saved her own life by engaging in the creative process of telling stories. In the United States as a refugee, she again found solace in books and novels such as Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce, and in the poetry of Elizabeth Bishop, T.S. Eliot, and Adrienne Rich. She was inspired to write when she entered Mount Holyoke College and read Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye. Lan received widespread critical acclaim when she wrote Monkey Bridge, published by Viking in 1997. Michiko Katuni of the New York Times wrote, Gao has not only made an impressive debut, but joined authors such as Salman Rushdie and Bharati Mukherjee in mapping the state of exile and its elusive geographies of loss and hope. Lan is the author also of The Lotus and the Storm, published by Viking Penguin in 2015, and co-author with Harlan Margaret Van Gao, your daughter, A Family in Six Tones, also published by Viking Press in 2020. Lan graduated from Mount Holyoke College and Yale Law School. She clerked for the legendary Judge Constance Baker Motley, the first African-American female federal judge in the United States, who, as an attorney for the NAACP, Legal Defense and Education Fund, had argued and won 9 out of 10 desegregation cases before the United States Supreme Court. She has also taught at Brooklyn Law School, Duke Law School, and William and Mary Law School, Michigan Law School, and is currently the Betty Hutton Williams Professor in International Economic Law at Chapman University Fowler School of Law, where she specializes in international business, corporate law, contracts, international human rights, women's rights, and the rule of law development and its relationship to culture. Her academic monograph on the rule of law, democracy, and culture was published by OUP in 2015. At its core, her legal scholarship centers on the development of markets, civil society, and democracy. I don't know when these two women sleep. I don't think that they do. In addition to being prolific scholars, producers, and leaders in the community, as I said, they are my friends, and they're extremely, extremely kind and generous, and I cannot wait for this conversation today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Pham. What a wonderful introduction, Hung. Thank you so much. And I also want to just say that Hung is just one of the most inclusive leaders that I know, whom I know. And she really welcomes everyone, and she's an amazing human being to work with. I love her dearly. So thank you so much for this opportunity, Hung. I am a film producer. I believe in the story and the power of storytelling through films and through the stories that we read. Storytelling enriches us. It allows us to see different perspectives and figure out our own in some ways. And I think for a lot of children of war, especially in terms of the Vietnamese refugees coming to America, it also allows us to heal and to deal with our own pain and trauma as children of war. So I'm delighted to have my friend Lan Cao here. Lan Cao is what we Bostonians would call wicked smart. and she is the only person who I know who can put up with me and have a 5-hour, at times on the phone discussion on the details of President Diem's assassination, or lately the 1968 Tet Offensive, and then equally we can turn around and talk about the issues of affirmative action in America. So welcome, friend.
Thank you so much.
So you are the voice in some ways of the refugee coming to America, and in particular, the Vietnamese American refugee who escaped South Vietnam, and the voice of those people who lost the war on the Vietnamese side. And so your perspective, as well as the voice that you bring, at times is often overlooked in American novels. So tell us, are you the Mai character of all of your books? What and your life, if you could share with the audience in terms of before 1975 and also coming to the United States?
Well, my first 2 books were fiction. So I just take things that are literal truths in my life and spin it further, which I really like doing. I find fiction to be a fantastic form for exploring what if, what could have been. And I like very much the notion that fiction opens up the ambivalent and the ambiguous space, which is what I'm very interested in. I'm much less interested in bright line rules or this is how it is. And, it's interesting because I'm a law professor. So I teach rule of law, and students want to know what's the bright line rule. And even in the area of contract law, corporate law, I try to nudge them away from that because there's so much complexity in life, and so much of life is about a very convoluted, complex, and unintended journey.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, having come to the United States as a refugee in the midst of loss, and then arriving in a country the United States, which we have a very complex relationship with, right? Yeah. So I'm interested in that complexity. And also my relationship with Vietnam itself is very much defined by love, loss, regret, remorse, anger. So I think all of those are things that you can explore in fiction, much more than in a kind of academic script where you have to footnote everything. So when I write fiction, I think of it as kind of like the dream world, the diving into the wreck, to use Adrienne Rich's poetry. And the daily life is more the surface level world. And to go into complexity, you have to dive deep. And it's very hard because when you dive deep, when you go back up, there's a lot of pressure, like when you scuba dive.
Yes.
So you have to be careful when you migrate from one world to the next. And I don't go into the war wreckage world that much, except when I'm writing. And so let's say when we talk today, it'll be because when I do the wreckage world, I'm by myself writing.
Yes.
So it's more solitary and easier to do than when you're in a space which is the surface level space and you're diving into the wreck. I think it's harder.
There's just so much honesty when you're writing. I think
you have to have authenticity.
Yeah, but reaching that authenticity is always sometimes really difficult. Yeah. And let's just bring it out into the open. You are the daughter of General Cao Van Vien, who is probably Vietnam's most respected general. But I never, as a friend, ever felt that you were preaching or that you had an agenda. But I always remember one of the early on when you talked about your family. One of the things that you shared with me was your dad. Your dad, always made sure that he had cyanide pills sewn into the bottom of his pants. Most Vietnamese American kids growing up just don't think about these things of cyanide pills that your dad had. Can you share a little bit about that? And how does one deal with that? Right.
Well, it's a very interesting dichotomy because my father was a general and went into battle, so he was wounded on the battlefield in 1963 and escaped death by just a tiny bit. Because I think what happened was that they were met with a lot of rapid fire from above, and he turned around to wave the troops up. And in turning around, the bullet hit his shoulder instead of his heart, because if he hadn't turned around, it would have hit his heart. So I learned about that and learned about how the trajectory of life, is mysterious. You don't know why you survive, and you don't know why somebody else didn't survive. And then, so in many ways, he was a soldier, but a very deep Buddhist.
You told me that.
So I grew up with very profound Buddhist. I never had any time with him at all, except when he did Buddhist meditation, because it was very busy. And only at night when he did Buddhist meditation would I be invited into the room. And we never even talked. So the communication was mostly by silence. But a lot is imparted by silence.
Yes.
When you're seeing somebody doing Buddhist meditation. And in 1963, because we talked about this too,
the famous 1963
President Diem's coup. And I think the most profound thing I learned from it was that whether right or wrong, because it's not political in this way of the historical component, but I just learned from the personal part was that because he was the commander of the airborne brigade at the time, and the coup plotters wanted the airborne to participate in overthrowing President Diem. And my father said that he thought the military should not be political. And so he did not participate. And the person next to him, Colonel Thom, was taken out and executed. And my father was then handcuffed, about to be taken out to be executed as well. And a friend of his saw him. The friend is one of the organizers of the coup, who said, no, you don't have to execute him. You just have to imprison him instead. So I think the idea of being brave in the, being true to yourself, even when your life is at stake. I learned about that, right? And so even though, I mean, of course I am his daughter, but I do want to say that my personal development, politically, from a human rights standpoint, how I view the war, etc., is really not inherited. That's really important to me because I'm not an ideologue. I do not inherit people's beliefs, even if they are my parents. I think it is really important because we've been given the privilege of education, a liberal arts education, critical thinking, to not just reflexively say, this side is right, absolutely, and this side is wrong, absolutely. Even though we may have a personal stake in feeling like, wow, we were on a good side too. That's not the point. I think the point really has to be that one looks at oneself and relationship to the world and come up with your own decision, whatever that may be, and including your own mistakes, I think, is also very important.
But I've always really admired you so much because clearly you've always stated what you believed, and but you've always been so incredibly thoughtful in public settings, in terms of our elders, in talking to them, and in terms of the respect and also the compassion that you have. But clearly you are your own mind. And I want to read something, a quote that you wrote, that was written in The Lotus in the Storm. As the war comes to its end, Min, the main character, imagines American politicians clamoring for an exit strategy. I imagine Kissinger skirting the room. I could see the slow, fluid shuffle, the calamitous face. He had some calculating to do. There was Congress to deal with. There was the matter of American pride, American projection of power, still necessary to maintain the American empire. Mai later highlights the irony of the Vietnamese American immigrant experience. We are going to America, the country that both betrays and redeems. What does it mean to be a Vietnamese American?
I think that on the one hand, I feel that it is our experience is similar to the experience of every other immigrant who has come to the United States, meaning that there's a collective journey that I think a lot of immigrants come, which is you're coming in, you're tentative, you're new, you're learning the language, you want your second generation children to do better than you. You have your enclaves, like Little Italy, Chinatown, we have Little Saigon. So you're insular, and then someone in your family detaches from the community and moves into the mainstream. And then there's the tug of war, the push-pull between how much to be American and how much to retain your cultural identity. I think that's a universal American story for immigrants who come, right? How do you become American? How do you, quote, assimilate? So we are very similar in that way. But I think we are different also. And the difference has to do with the relationship between the United States and Vietnam and South Vietnam with respect to the war. Because I think that if you study the war and the relationship between South Vietnam and the US, of course, I mean, you can imagine sort of like South Vietnam is like Ukraine now, in the sense of needing Western and American aid. But how much is that going to continue, even with Ukraine? I mean, Americans have not
2 years max, you think?
Maybe, because now only 40% of Americans, I read a poll yesterday, support aid to Ukraine. And this is even before any Americans are sent to Ukraine. Whereas in Vietnam, you had Americans sending. So the idea here is that you have a war that is fought. And of course, it's fought with America first, because every country is going to be looking at its own self-interest. So you look at the relationship of Vietnam, which is a very poor country, emerging from colonialism, being dependent on the US. And I think you're begging for aid. So of course, how the war is fought, how it's managed, who controls the main strategy is going to be the United States, right? And so the complication is that it's a war the US didn't win. So if, and of course, I don't want to get into the history of it, because I think it's better to keep it more personal and literary, right? Yes. But we do know that with the Paris Peace Accord, the United States did not return as, was supposed to be. So you feel as a child of South Vietnam, we were betrayed because you said you would do something and you didn't do it. But on the other hand, you took us, and we would have had a very different future if we had stayed, right? So in that way, the coming here is much more explosive to someone like myself than if I were just an immigrant following prior waves of immigrants who came to the United States. And also not just the structural relationship between the US and Vietnam, but also personally when we came, there were lots of people who felt that, the loss of the war was due to South Vietnam.
Well, true. I mean, I grew up really always thinking that I am a reminder of the loss, of their loss, right? Of the American loss.
Right. Yeah. And then I came in 75, and there were many, many movies which explored, and even the vets were not, the mainstream did not want to even be reminded of Americans who had fought in Vietnam, much less Vietnamese who had come out of that war, right? So when finally movies about the American vets came out, they were also very demonized, even the vets. So, and Vietnam was portrayed kind of like this black hole, right? That it's just sucking American innocence and American nobility. So on a personal level, it was very much like you reminded us of a war that was controversial, and you lost the war, and why are you here? Right. So it's very different than others.
And you constantly deal with this dichotomy, I think.
Yeah, I think you deal with that dichotomy
as a Vietnamese American. I'm not sure what the answer is, but
no answer.
There is no
journey.
Answer. Yeah, I agree with you. This is a really special time in our history, the Vietnamese American history, because for the first time, this generation is talking about not only the war, but also about the issues of trauma and the issue of being children of the war. And in your book, you write so eloquently, and it's of the trauma of losing one's identity, of coming to a new country, losing a lost culture, losing family members, and also even the loss of identity as a mother, where the daughter now is, even at the age of 12, is so much more Americanized and ends up navigating the mother and the family. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about trauma. There's, and I'll just start to go personal and more personal, but how did you deal with all that trauma growing up?
Well, my family was very open. It's actually, my parents were super open, super progressive.
They never push you. You told me that.
Not like you have to do this way. They push me to excel, yes, but not like you must be an engineer or you must be a doctor, right? So they were super open. I wish they had guided me more, actually, because it was very much open, like do whatever you wish, which I think is very unlike most Vietnamese parents, you know. And so in Vietnam, even in Vietnam, my parents were very open. And the reason why I bring that up is because I have an uncle in Vietnam who was a member of the Viet Cong or the National Liberation Front. Right? So he was kind of like he left the family. He's out there in his Viet Cong cells, right? And he had 3 children, and the 3 children would be raised by the other members of the family who were not on the side of the Viet Cong. But he would come at family gatherings. We would have to hide him because he would have been captured.
So this is in Saigon.
This is in Saigon, right? So the living in that setting made me realize that there's a lot of contradictions that one just accommodates in life. That it's not as if the purpose of life is to get rid of contradiction. It's not like if you have contradiction, you're hypocritical. I think it's much more complicated than that, because we you know, I was very close to this uncle. He loved the books that I love, like
this is from your mom's side?
My mom's side, yeah. Kiếm hiệp như là anh hùng xạ điêu, thần điêu đại hiệp, right? So I love that. He loved it. He had more time to discuss these things than my father ever did, right? So I developed a very close bond with him. And the entire debate about the war would be freely given while we were there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And his son grew up to join a very elite so it was like opposite of his own father. And we all just accommodated that contradiction, right? We never said, you must be this or you must be that, even though it was very explosive sometimes.
I'm sure.
It was very explosive because it was life and death. And I noticed, for example, you know, my father was very much about, we did discuss President Yim, we did talk a lot about the war, but the memories that I had of him were more like on the Buddha's birthday, or maybe even once a month, I don't remember. He would buy these chim se se, I don't know what they're called. Sparrow. Are they sparrows? Yeah, chim se se. And he would buy them from a store. I don't know what would have happened to them had he not bought them, but 100. And they would be in these bags that have holes in them for them to breathe. And he would put one on my head and then let it fly. One on my head and say, you make good karma. You free these birds. Every month, and it became a ritual, right? So it was sort of a way to deal with the explosiveness of life. Now, of course, you know, we grew up in Saigon, right? You did too?
Yeah, which was, you know, in some ways we knew of the war,
but it's not like right there. It's not like right there. But in 68, you have the Tet Offensive, but it was very much right there. So that was my first time really seeing the war close by, because I live in Chalon, and a lot of the Tet Offensive was actually more in Chalon than in Saigon. And the Saigon, I think the Tet Offensive was dealt with very quickly, but it stayed in Chalon and Hue for a much longer time. And the reason was that there was a racetrack in Chalon, the horse racetrack, which is flat. And I read later that it was a sort of like a military strategy to capture that racetrack, because it served as a maybe a planning center from where you could go and attack Saigon, you know. So it was very close to my house, and that was the first time that I really felt like, oh my God, we could really lose the war. You know, it's really close. And my uncle was like, he was giving us warnings too. My Viet Cong uncle, be careful. So it was very,
right,
you know,
under the Ban Bao.
acceptable.
Was that the under
Yeah,
the Ban Bao?
yeah,
You want to tell?
yes, that's right. You remember?
Yes. Lan Cao would actually go. Oh, yes, Lan Cao told me so many stories, but one of the stories is the fact that her uncle, who was a Viet Cong, would actually send messages through through
There's a vendor. There's a
Is-
vendor
a
who would
particular
go,
vendor.
I mua bánh bao, I mua bánh bao, right? She would be passing my street.
please come and eat Ban Bao.
Yeah.
And then when
And
she
then
comes to
she would push
Lan
a
Cao's
particular
house,
one,
she would hand Lan Cao, this is a special Ban Bao.
and you open it up and there would be a message from my uncle
Yeah.
in there. Like, you better leave in 75. Yeah.
And how
So
was
it was traumatic in
Yeah.
that sense, because my mother would always go every morning to Nha Thương Cộng Hòa, which is a military hospital. And for some reason felt it was important to take me along. So that was very,
you must have seen such
that
horrific
it was horrific, because you actually see war wounds.
Yeah.
And very hard, you know, because the soldiers who were there were on both sides.
Yeah.
There were Viet Cong soldiers who were at Nha Thương Cộng Hòa, and there were Quân lực Việt Nam Cộng Hòa soldiers there, and no limbs. Yeah. All burned.
Which most kids should not be seeing.
Yeah, no eyelashes. And you know, it's a wartime hospital, so it's not as if it's like Cornell Medical Center, right? It's very chaotic. And just, it's very hard to forget those, because you visit them and you develop a relationship with them, right? And these are people who do not die. In other words, it's not an emergency room where you see them and then for 2 minutes and then they're gone. If you visit them every morning, let's say to talk to them, or I did things like, you know, show them Dennis the Menace cartoons, just pictures. You develop a relationship, and then tomorrow you come in and they're gone.
Yeah. And how do you deal with that as a child?
It's really pretty awful. Yeah. So you see the shadow of war when you go to a hospital. You see what happened after, and the lingering, you know, how people survive for so long.
Yeah.
I mean, it's to this day, if I see somebody without a limb, I'm very, very vibrating with
shaking.
Yes, shaking. It's really, really hard to not go back there.
How was your dad after 75 coming to the States, and your family?
Nobody talked about it.
No one.
Not a word. Yeah. And always, I even remember they said, put the curtain down. You do not deal with it. And they were very good at compartmentalization.
Well, for the first 2 years, you ate it with plastic forks and knives, and because they all thought that they were heading back to Vietnam.
Yeah, nobody, you know, it's very interesting, the psychological ability to be delusional. It must be a coping mechanism, because in many ways, delusion is very comforting, right? And of course, you don't know that you're delusional, because if you knew, you would not think you were delusional, right? So you live in this world,
right,
of a kind of psychological twilight zone, but you think it's the reality. So up until, as far as I can tell, like 75, nobody thought that they would need to leave. There were lots of people who were thinking, well, of course the Americans will come back. How could they ever, a super country, powerhouse, they would never, not because they love Vietnam, nobody thought that, but they would never allow themselves to be seen as like a paper tiger. So Nixon will come back, not knowing the dynamic of constitutional relationship between Congress and the executive branch at all in the US, right? People in Vietnam in 75 were holding on to the letter that President Nixon wrote to President Thieu and thinking that has legal weight. And they don't realize, well, I mean, the United States is a country of separation of powers and 3 separate and co-equal branches. So if Congress does not want to fund, Nixon's promise is not, doesn't have any real substantive content. Nobody really knew that, but they're like, Nixon wrote this letter. And of course, he said he would come back if there is violation of the Paris Accord. So I think until 75, people were like, no, nothing will happen. Until the very last, right? Like until maybe the first of April.
I think April.
Right. And then even when people came, I know, I mean, my family was like, well, in 2 years, we will come back. So we're only buying plastic. Everything was plastic. And rewash it, right? And
washing the plastics, right?
Washing the plastic. And of course, it's great because I think now we should all wash plastic and not throw it, single use. But their use of plastic was not environmental concern. It was like, why should we establish ourselves here at all? We're just transient. We're just passing through.
We're just passing through.
I remember the delusion in 79. I don't know if you remember there was a border skirmish with China.
Yes.
Right. And the people in Virginia were like, oh, we'll go back now.
It's our time. It's our time.
Like, it's just so, it's sort of like hope springs eternal for them, And as a result, they never even bothered to learn English because they're like, we don't have to learn English. And now, of course, with Little Saigon so established, you have accountants, lawyers, dentists. You can live in Orange County, Little Saigon, and not ever leave there and not have to learn English. But, there's a sense that we would never really dig our roots in the US. And so that trauma was kind of like, we're returning. Yeah. And, in 75, 77, there's no communication because of the embargo.
That's right.
So it's not like you're leaving your country in 1990 and you can email or fax. It was just like no idea what is happening.
Yeah, I remember my dad had to send it to a friend in Canada, right? And then Canada could send it back to Vietnam.
France, right? Yeah. And France would send it to Vietnam. So you don't really know what's happening there.
All these networks where you could send money, right, only to France or Canada, and then they would send it, or they'll find your family members in Saigon and give it to them. Yeah. God knows what they were giving. Right. You've been back. I mean, we're gonna see Tony's film 3 seasons, Ba More, and you've seen the economic reforms of Doi Moi. Reflections. You've been back several times and you've volunteered quite a bit in Vietnam in terms of a lot of work, of legal work. Thoughts?
Well, I want very much for Vietnam to succeed as a country. So because my area is civil society, economic development, and rule of law. Mm-hmm. And because since 79, 1980, and Vietnam has made Doi Moi, is it Doi Moi or Doi Moi? Doi Moi. I couldn't tell because a lot of times in English without the diacritics, I'm thinking, is it Doi Moi, new life? Or is it Doi Moi, to change? Like, well, you could change and have a new life too. So they're compatible.
And then on top of that is the northern accent. Lan Cao speaks in a very beautiful southern accent.
Who does?
You do.
Really?
Yes, I do. You do. And so
my Vietnamese,
those northerners who came down, like my parents, in 54, just really butchered that, I think, a lot of times, right?
Yeah, I went to Vietnam in 91. And I got a fellowship from the Ford Foundation. And I was very interested in the question, because remember, this is at the time when the Berlin Wall collapsed and the Soviet Union collapsed. So I was working at a law firm, which is called Paul Weiss, Rifkin, Wharton, and Garrison. It's a Manhattan, Wall Street type law firm. And I was doing litigation before. And I decided I wanted to switch to transactional work because I want to see the role of foreign investment to spur economic development in emerging market economies. So I went from a senior attorney in litigation down all the way to the beginning of doing transactional work. And I got a fellowship from the Ford Foundation. And my central question is, why in the world, why are some countries rich and why are some countries poor? And of course, it's a very complicated question because there's history, geography, colonialism, internal dynamics as well, right? As well as structural and external dynamics. But then later on, this is not what I was, my question was, why are some countries rich and some poor? But then later, when I started becoming a scholar in this area, we discussed this quote, Naja. I read a quote by Larry Summers, who was the US Secretary of Treasury, who said, in the history of the world, no one has ever washed a rental car. So I'm thinking, you need to have a sense, even if not private property, of a person having a stake, right, in the outcome. You could own something for 99 years, and that could be the equivalent of private property. But it led me to think, right, what are the things that Vietnam can do from a rule of law economic strategy that would make it be, let's say, an exporter of rice again, rather than an importer of rice. So that was my fellowship with the Ford Foundation, to look at trade rules, contract law, corporate law, and how to establish that in Vietnam. So I went with the Ford Foundation. I would not have gone back ever, and I still have not ever gone back to Vietnam, just like without some kind of professional umbrella.
So it's just not to reminisce. Like
not to reminisce.
Old days.
Because I feel like if I go just like, oh, I'm just visiting because I was born there, just by itself. And you're just...
I know. It's okay. Let's just take a moment.
I think if you just go as a Vietnamese refugee back and only bring your heart, right, it would be too much, because I'm very sensitive, right? So if you can compartmentalize, then it would be okay, because I know lots of people who do it. But I know my makeup is that because I'm brooding and introverted and kind of like tend to ask the same question over and over, it would not be good for me, right? To just go with just my heart.
You left at 13. Most of us left so much younger.
And and I spent all my life really in the US. I mean, Vietnam is really tiny for me from a chronological standpoint, but I feel like almost all my heart is formed there, you know, and the rest, the development is cerebral in the US, right? So I don't want to go back just with my heart exposed. So I'm like, I'm going to the Ford Foundation. Then the next time I went, I was like with a group where we're teaching law. So it's very external. You know, law is just, you can be very mechanical. And every time I've gone, it's with a professional. And then I do go, of course, how can you not have personal echoes? But it's all kind of contained, because you're thinking, well, my primary journey is really just teaching this class in corporate law. And I love teaching Vietnamese students.
Why?
They are just incredible. I mean, there's nothing like teaching the students in Vietnam. They are so open to learning. They want, you never have to motivate them. I mean, they are just internally vibrating with hope, with excitement, with swallowing up every opportunity that is given to them.
Yeah.
You know, and I felt like that when I came to this country too. You know, like I was very similar to them, except I was in the US trying to learn English, trying to sort of, a part of me feeling like, you didn't want us here. I can show you that we deserve to be here, right? So we are going to succeed in the mainstream too. And so some of the context is different. Our Vietnamese experience in the US is different than the Vietnamese student in Vietnam, but the desire to succeed is the same, because we came with nothing and we're like losers. You lost everything. You're a bunch of losers. Why should we take you? We don't even want to see you. You remind us of why we lost the war. So you have this sense that I'm going to show that I can, and in the mainstream, and I actually picked litigation on purpose, because to be a small Asian woman doing litigation in Wall Street, you're going against stereotype. And I did that on purpose. You know, I was more drawn to family law. But I'm like, no, I don't want to go there. I want to do really aggressive mergers and acquisition, commercial, corporate, Wall Street, male. And I feel a lot of similarities with the students in Vietnam, who also have the same desire of doing well and taking every opportunity. So I want to go. I love teaching them. They're humble. They are desirous. They're so appreciative.
Yeah.
And I feel, you know, even though I'm teaching corporate law, right, you know, my love really is rule of law, not just corporate law. But there's so much in corporate law, which is also about rule of law, you know. So the discussions with them, they're very curious. And you don't have that as much with students in the US. Of course you do too, but I'm saying that they're used to it more than the student in Vietnam, right? So I do feel like I want to motivate my American students more in an American law school.
There's this debate, and you reminded me of this in terms of when we talk about what does it mean to be Vietnamese. And, you know, there's a struggle, I think, because in 2 more years will be the 50th anniversary of the fall, is, you know, and I see this with my daughter too, where she is really drawn. She wants to learn more about, you know, the culture, Vietnamese culture and the war. But, you know, but yet, you know, she is of a different experience than a child who was born in Vietnam. And Vietnam has moved into this incredibly robust economy. How do you define? Because for you and I, you're right, we've lived in the US for such a long time, but Vietnam has such is so emotionally within both of us on so many levels. What does it mean to be Vietnamese?
You know, a part of me wants to almost exorcise it from me, because it's overwhelming sometimes. Because I'm you know, I remember a quote by Faulkner in which he said something. I'm paraphrasing. He put it much more succinctly. The past is not dead. It's not even past. All right. And it's chronologically, it was only 13 years for me, but very powerful, I think, because of the trauma of war. You know, I really, from a cerebral intellectual standpoint, I do not want to perpetuate the notion of Vietnam with war. I mean, that's almost like a stance for me, right? Because I feel like it has 1,000+ year history. The war is only 20 years. And I don't want to play into the Western image of Vietnam as just war. So I really believe that intellectually. And also the notion of the war, not just at Vietnam as war. I don't want to perpetuate that. I also don't want to perpetuate the notion of Vietnam as an American war experience. That's a double layer, right? Because it's kind of like when you read the news, also any country that is in the news is only in the news because it affects the US, right? You don't hear about Afghanistan anymore. It's still there. You don't hear about Iraq anymore. It's still there. Right? So I don't want, and Vietnam became a geopolitically significant war because of American involvement. So I have a lot of intellectual difficulty with Vietnam as war, Vietnam as an American wartime experience. But in my personal heart, it's very hard for me. My heart opposes that belief because I grew up in war. So it's hard.
And we don't know anything other.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, of course, I know the culture, right? And I know a lot of the celebration that is non-war related. But even the celebration that is very much big for me is the Tet Offensive. I mean, so we have Tet, but we also have the Tet Offensive. So it's not like you can just I can't think of Tet and never think of the Tet Offensive because it was very traumatic for me, right? The Tet Offensive. So it's hard to extricate. So because the war is inside us, even when I make an intellectual decision to say, I'm not going to think about Vietnam as war, I'm thinking about
war all the time.
And everybody in my family was involved in the war in one way or another. I mean, even my grandfather, right? He was a landowner and was captured by maybe it was the Viet Minh or the Viet Cong, I don't know. And then was killed because he was a landlord. Right? So this is even, I think it was in 61, 62, I don't know. My father tried to save him, but by the time he parachuted into that area, he was already killed. So it's hard to have this family history without thinking about war. And I think when you think about war, it's very hard for it not to be with us.
Yeah, you just wonder when the trauma will end, right? Within ourselves on so many levels.
My mother had much more trauma than I did. I mean, not that you compare traumas, but in terms of, she was on a bus, she was carrying my brother, and the bus was attacked. And the bus driver saw that she was pregnant, and he said, let me lie on top of you to save you. And the entire bus, all the passengers were killed, except my mother, who had been covered by this bus driver, who died. But so she had that experience. And so it's more direct than mine. And so for years, she told my father, because my brother was very troubled, was very sensitive, this brother who was in the womb when this happened. And my mother would say, oh, because what happened to him.
The horrors of what happened.
And the whole family was like, you're just a mother who makes excuses for your son. Because he was troubled and he didn't succeed in the mainstream way. So everybody was looking at that. And my mother would excuse it, quote, by saying that this is because of that. And now I read about how trauma can enter through the womb, through the mother. And I'm like, oh my God, we all discounted what she said. And perhaps
there is some truth to it.
Yeah.
I'm seeing Harlan. Harlan is your daughter. She's sending me messages here.
Oh,
so
she is.
But so is a good segment to move over to your current book. Congratulations. I never said that because of COVID, but congratulations on your current book, Family of Six Tones, talking about the refugee mother and an American daughter, whom I relate to quite a bit. Harlan and my daughter are friends. They know each other. Tell us about this book. How did it come about? Thank God you wrote it and not I.
Well, the book is a memoir. And I never go to memoirs. It is not my go-to form.
Because
I like fiction, right? I remember I said fiction, you can look at ambiguity, ambivalence, you can spin. Memoir, and even though it is true that people can have different memories of the same event, So it's not even a memoir, it's not fixed. It's not like there's only one true story, but you are making a promise with the reader that whatever you write is your truth. You're not fictionalizing anything. And, you know, I go to creative writing to avoid and to do a very different type of writing than law writing. So to go to memoir for me is, I'm not dealing with ambivalence in the same way that I'm dealing in fiction. And I have no, you know, there's a line in T.S. Eliot, the Wasteland, come in under this red rock and I will show you something different from your shadow at morning. I will show you fear in a handful of dust. It's something like that. And fiction to me is the red rock that you can come in for shelter, even as you're exploring something that is not sheltering. Right? So even when you're dealing with shattering things, you need shelter of a red rock. There's no shelter in memoir. So already I'm like, I don't want to do it. But I did it basically because my daughter and I were interviewed for an NPR show. It was actually about the 68 Tet Offensive.
50th anniversary of the Tet Offensive.
Yeah. So they interviewed us, and the format was Harlan was going to ask me some questions. And so we did the interview. And serendipitously, because I don't mention these things when I'm doing it, right? My editor at Viking Penguin listened to it. And she said, we would like to take this and put it in a book form. We would like you to do a mother-daughter story, which is unique in the sense that it's alternating chapters. And also, normally when you do a mother-daughter story, it's the mother writing maybe about her relationship with her mother. You know, my daughter was only 15 at the time. So it's very raw for her. So we were approached to do it. And my daughter loves to write, so she wanted to do it. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do it. And she said, no, I want you to do it. So I actually ended up doing, but it was very hard for me to do because it's too raw for me to have no red rock of fiction, to just be sitting out there dealing with rock and no rock, right? To hide under.
I heard that you both wrote separately and then you came together because it was just too painful to go back and forth. Is that right?
We tried reading each other's chapters first, and we would talk about the same event, and it would be like Rashomon. Right? It's like, no, she saw it this way, I saw it this way. And of course, you know, I would see her write something, and I'm like,
how could you write that?
I'll remember, and I've mentioned this before, but it really stuck with me. She talked about how when I drove her to school, we'd be alone in the car, right? So there's nothing else but the two of us in the car. And I would be telling her, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this, right? And in her writing, she said, my mother screamed at me. And I'm like, God, that's
the perspectives.
I'm like, so when I read it, I edited it to, she raised her voice. And she was so mad.
Because that's how she saw you.
She said, no, you did not raise your voice. You screamed. And we fought over that word because I'm like, that makes me sound very strident. It doesn't make me look maternal. It doesn't make me look great, right? But she's like, no, I'm keeping scream. And then I think she's changed it to yell.
I know. And I think we're both very private. It's also hard because this generation is very comfortable sharing.
Yeah. So, you know, and that provoked a very big fight where I did scream. I mean, correcting the scream resulted in my screaming. So I saw in her face, see, that proves she was happy that I was screaming because now it proves to her that yes, you do scream after all.
That's right.
So I'm like, we're not going to check each other's writing. You write whatever you want. And we gave it to our editor. who was a magnificent editor who could just be the buffer.
And she just dealt with you individually as well as
and in fact, it turned out well because it was not scripted. We did not plan our writing. You know, we just wrote our own. And when it needed a response, we would do it, but very subtly.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it very hard. I can't imagine ever doing a memoir again. You know, because it's really very, especially if you're talking about things like nightmares. You know, the word trauma is sometimes overused.
Yeah.
But in our case, it really is. And sometimes I feel, even when we're talking about trauma, that there are lots of people in the Vietnamese community who have worse. I mean,
much worse. Yeah.
Rationally worse, you know, in you know, prison for 10, 15 years, in escaping by boat. I mean, there are lots of other things.
PTSD?
Yeah. So ours is just, you know, for me, because I'm a writer, I'm able to look at my little sliver, but it's very traumatic for me. And, you know, and people deal with traumas differently. For example, I think my parents cope much better than I did because they can compartmentalize. My father he had an iron curtain, and he said, curtain, that's it.
So you never talked about it with him?
Never. Okay. Later on, I did talk about it when I came to the US in college and high school. I started reading every book that I could ever see in the library on Vietnam. Because in high school, I had no friends. I mean, like not one friend, right? And that was very lonely for me in high school.
You're an introvert. I'm an extrovert.
Yeah, yes. I had no friends, and I didn't speak English well. And like my clothes were from Goodwill, and I was teased. So all of my comfort level was in the library. And my father would take me to the library on Saturdays and drop me there from 10 until 6 p.m.
Mine did the same.
I was just at he said, you know, so he said the library is the public park for the mind. So you just go in there and we'll drop you off. And that's where I discovered James Joyce, Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, where he said, I'm getting rid of nationalism, right? I am going to think for myself. I may be Irish, but I'm sick of the church. I'm going to define my own root. And I'm like, this is great. This is how I feel. Right. Yeah. So so the point is that because I had no friends, right, I was mostly in the library doing all this reading and knowing that I love stories and how stories can definitely change your life, but not in a propaganda way. You know, it cannot be this side is right, this side is wrong.
Yeah, and it's never that black and white.
Yeah,
because otherwise, that's the same with, I think, the Vietnam War.
Yeah,
right. Well, we can continue talking because you and I can talk for hours and hours. But it's important, I think. Thank you for coming, because I think this generation is starting to tell our authentic stories, the children of war. And I think your voices are important. Voices like yourself and others who are talking very openly about trauma and who have written about trauma in their novels. So thank you.
Thank you, Naja. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We're going to open up to questions. I just want to make sure I have mine up here because there's a list of Q&A here. So, okay. So let's open it up to questions. We have a few minutes. I just also want to leave this here for the Zoom folks. Any questions? Yes.
I thank you so much for sharing. That was riveting and resonated so much. I think I'm first generation Vietnamese American, meaning that my parents emigrated from Vietnam and I'm born here in the United States. And I was wondering, under the guise of this being a series on Vietnamese American identity, if you could possibly talk about what are my personal feelings right now living in America between resentment and gratitude. And when you talk about the idea of there being a dichotomy or life not being about avoiding conflict or avoiding contradiction, how do you navigate that knowing what hopefully you think your successes are, which I think and everybody in this room thinks are amazing, versus the trauma and what you have to deal with and what you've had to deal with in this country. Could you speak about that a little bit?
I've spoken a lot about the external collision between the United States and Vietnam and how that affected each one of us when we come here, right? And that's an external collision. When we came, we were resented in many ways, right? But for me, how I have navigated it is knowing full well this external collision. There are aspects of Vietnamese culture that is very unique in many ways that I have found to be very helpful, right? So, for example, when I grew up in Vietnam and in the US, a word that I hear all the time in my family, and I think it's a very uniquely Vietnamese concept, right, is the concept of mang ơn, biết ơn. And the word ơn, I don't even know how to translate because I've looked it up in the dictionary. So for those of you who don't speak Vietnamese, I can only describe what it conveys because I can't find an equivalent one word English synonym for it. But it's kind of like a gratitude. That goes beyond. But it's more than gratitude. It's not just filial, right? Because you can have mang ơn with anybody who has how would you translate it? It's very hard. It's a concept more than a word, right? Mắc nợ, that's exactly right. It's it's a parallel. It is a parallel. It's a parallel concept. It's a parallel. The more positive manifestation. Yeah. No. Right. No, it's the debt, which is a negative. Yes, but a debt that is not necessarily a monetary debt, right? So if biết ơn is very important. Một người mà không biết ơn is a very bad person. I don't care how rich you are, right? So if you don't know that somebody has bestowed a karmic blessing on you, that's bad. So the ơn is like knowing that I have received this blessing, right? And then the word mang, I feel like your entire body, mang is like you're carrying it. So you have to carry this gratitude and acknowledgement of gratitude on your whole body. And then the flip side is the debt, which can be it can be like a invisible umbilical cord between two people. It's an invisible umbilical cord. You see that within your parents. You see that coming to America in terms of seeing the hardship that they've gone through. Yeah. So there is a no. It's not a financial no, but it is there that is very much unspoken. And it's in that case, it's filial. But I have even heard people in my family talk about it in terms of marriage. So, for example, duyên nợ, like two people are together, and it's because there is something that is binding them. It could be a debt, but not in a bad way, that they still have to work out, maybe from a prior life, that they did not work out in the prior life, and now they meet each other again. Whatever convolution had existed has to be untangled in this life. So to me, that has been very helpful for me. So every time I see something that is is heartbreaking for me, and any one of us can, there are moments in each of our life where you think, okay, I have made it because I have the external criteria that I've met, and then something will happen where you think, no, you're delusional. You have not made it because you may think you have, but others have not. Don't think that. So let's say you think, oh, I've only lived 13 years in Vietnam. I'm in the US. I'm an American. Right? I have American passport. And then something will happen. It could be very small. But you think, no, they don't think you are. So you're delusional to think you are. You're very pathetic for thinking you are, and now you should go back to defining yourself. I think that's very important. That the desperation for acceptance is something we've got to let go of. Okay, because I have had instances where you think, well, I don't really have that much of an accent anymore. I have a JD. I'm very established. Something will happen where you will be thrown off the rail. Where you're thinking, nope, you're not of this country. Something will happen where you're gonna think, how could you have thought? How were you so dumb that you're that delusional? And then you'll go back, like you are constantly in one contradiction. Yes, I belong. No, I don't belong. Your belonging has to be very equilibrium from the inside. And the way to do it for me is to understand that in Vietnamese culture, also there's yin yang. It's built-in contradiction is okay. So when you are faced with the contradiction, you don't have to collapse. You have to go, well, that's how it is. So if you expect that, right, there is yang in yin and there's yin in yang. You can be a foreigner in America, and sometimes you can be an American in America. You can be a foreigner in Vietnam. You go back and you don't feel at home. So it's not like you think, oh, let me go back to 110 Ngô Quyền Chợ Lớn, my home, and think, oh, this is my home. Not at all, right? So it has to be inside. So there's the yin-yang understanding that contradictions and paradoxes do not have to throw you off kilter. There's lots of it in our lives. People can give you a dirty look and you're thinking, oh, how come? And the other person didn't get a dirty look. Or somebody asks you, where are you from? And nobody else is asked that. You're going to think, well, I'm an alien. You can't go that. You cannot let people make you be a billiard ball. But back to the gratitude, I think it's really important to just know whatever I have, mang ơn for what you have now. And that is really self-satisfying. You don't go for external acceptance. There's no need for prizes. Never compare your inside with somebody else's outside. You don't know what they're going through. They may look great, but maybe they have their own internal paradoxes as well. And I think it's really important for somebody like us who are visible minorities to not be defined by others and to choose a career path in which you have the option for self-definition. I think is much more important than a career path that's going to bring you money just for that sake. That's how I have navigated with it.
Di Lang, thank you so much for giving South Vietnamese more agency through representation. When you look at the literature, the South Vietnamese are convenient villains, right? Or scapegoats, however you want to see it, through film, through various perspectives. And bias, whether conscious or unconscious, is real, right? It depends on where you sit. If you start by seeing the war as a civil war versus as an imperialist, exercise during the Cold War, between Cold War rivalries, that, your views are shaped by those experiences, right? And so for me, for instance, I grew up with, people in Louisiana who really lived through trauma, through re-education camps. And I always think that true reconciliation cannot happen unless the South Vietnamese have more agency and more representation, right? Their voices seem to be muted. And I know that there are more authentic storytelling that's happening right now that's helping these voices come to life. And, when we saw the fall of Kabul, for instance, the trauma that was triggered from those scenes, I cannot tell you personally, I've never seen my father, who served in the South Vietnamese Air Force, cry before. He didn't even cry during my mother's funeral, right? But he cried when he saw those scenes because I think that was really triggering. So I guess my question is, do you think that reconciliation can happen in our lifetimes? And there are repercussions, right, from these intergenerational traumas that are
embedded in our political polarization right now, because, you know, many people wonder why Vietnamese Americans, a certain segment, are very conservative, ultra conservative, even why they follow, you know, these narratives. And so I think that has to do with, you know, the war, right? Because, and you can also argue civil war, like there's still reconciliation happening, right? And that's having an impact on our current political environment. But I do want to address the reconciliation piece and what you think needs to happen for that to be a reality.
Yes, I think that in many ways, because I'm in academia, you know, and most people in academia do not understand why the South Vietnamese are still stuck. Like, move on, right? And you are right that if the South Vietnamese experience is suppressed, you cannot move on if your voice is suppressed. Once you're able to articulate and unleash it out, it's easier. So you either have to go into therapy, right, for a personal,
which we both have.
Which we have. I think therapy is very helpful. Right? It's a very deeply internal and very hard thing to do. If it's real, like long-term therapy, you know, not just, oh, I'm messy and I want to get rid of that one habit, then that can be fast. But a healing therapy takes a long time. But so either therapy or having a voice. And I think you're right. I mean, look, you have a book called I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. You have to be able to sing to be able to move on. So I think that because the people who make culture in the US have a stake in perpetuating the Vietnam War in one way only, those that have a different trajectory, it's very hard to get heard. And so you have to write it, Yeah, like if you write about the war and you say, well, you know, actually, we believe we had a noble cause. That's like, no, it has to be, it started out as a noble cause, and it's actually the US was on the wrong side. I mean, that's hard if you're living in Orange County or the Vietnamese community. There are millions here. Are they all on the wrong side? You can expand the conversation. The conversation has to be expanded. Even losers, even people who have lost, deserve a voice. Plus, we were your allies. I mean, we are not to be slandered and disdained and snickered at, right? So if you're going to be snickering at people, they're going to react. So for me, you know, I just look at this gap and I write a story out of it and do it in a loving way. You know, you cannot be an ideologue. I mean, we do not want to refight the war in an ideological way. My scholarship is really just about, you know, I believe in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I defend the Universal Declaration of Human Rights on the basis of universalism. It's not a Western document. Everybody wants human rights. It doesn't matter whether you, and by the way, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights passed by the General Assembly was drafted by a Chinese, an Arab, and also several Westerners. It is not Western. So there are lots of people who want to denigrate it by saying, well, it's a Western agenda. Okay, it is not. Human rights is universal. So my idea here is just to expand it so that everybody, including losers, have a voice so people understand why we are here. And I think once you have that, you can have more reconciliation. And I think you're right. You know, the fall of Kabul was devastating for me to watch. And immediately, I don't know if many of you know this, you know, a lot of Vietnamese formed groups to sponsor Afghan refugees. And I had a family in my house for like about 6 months, 4 or 6 months. We had a group in my city, 5 of us, and we sponsored this family who was the father was a medic for the American SEALs, and he and his family got out. They were the first sponsored out of Kabul. So we relived that experience, right? And it is also important to see that the US also needs to step up in the sense that this fellow was fighting with the US Army and he was left behind until he was taken out. And I think that reconciliation is, I guess my point is you can have it, but it's one-to-one. You can have one-to-one, and that's all you can have, because you don't need bigger. It will create ripple effects.
Well, thank you for a very illuminating talk. And we've been talking a lot about Vietnamese American identities, and it varies from generation to generation. And I think that because the experience of each generation is different, we have different coping mechanism. You shared the example of your parents having a curtain on that past, and you struggling with it as an outsider coming to the country that not only betrayed you but also redeemed you. So it's a very conflicting experience and attitude. And then there are younger generation like your daughter, your children, and the students here at Columbia who are born in the US, who believe, and actually they should believe, that they are insiders, Americans, born and bred as American. So what would affect their sense of identity as a Vietnamese American? And your example of the book that you've written with your daughter is illuminating. I will run out and buy it and read it. But your experience, the story that you told about writing it, and it makes me feel like each generation is having their own story that they struggle with telling. And sometimes we're not having a dialogue. We're not talking to each other, but sometimes we are talking past each other. And so how would you see that there might be a reconciliation between different generations and their experiences in their sense of identity?
You know, when my daughter was born, I struggled a lot with the issue of, should she be ambidextrous, right? You can spin it like ambidextrous is positive. Dichotomize is more like, oh, you're split. But I thought, should I really introduce her and let Vietnam be part of her culture, right? And I go back and forth, because you are right when you said they should have the ability to say, I am an American, and be fully, claiming that space, not like 1 foot here, 1 foot there. Do I dare disturb the universe? In a minute, there's time for decisions and revisions, which a minute will reverse. That do I dare and do I dare, which is from the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, is a horrible way in many ways to live a fully aware life. Is not always great. I keep going back to delusion. Sometimes delusion is very good, rather than constantly do I dare and do I dare. To be 1 foot in one culture and 1 foot in another is always like this. It can be destabilizing. So I stopped speaking Vietnamese to her. I stopped speaking Vietnamese to her, and I regret it now, right? Because she could have just absorbed it and been very fluent. Now she just sort of understands it. She puts it like she has nail salon fluency, right? If she goes into a nail salon and they say something about her, she knows what they're saying. But she doesn't have the kind of fluency. I mean, not that I am fluent, but I'm certainly more fluent than she is, right? So I made the decision that I'm not going to make her be language-wise split, because I thought being split was very hard for me, because I constantly have to say, do I dare? Do I calibrate? So she's not split language-wise, but it's not possible, even if you want to insulate them, to say Vietnam will not be part of your life. It will be, because all my choices are really about, like, for example, I'm constantly saying to her, you have to have a plan B. You have to have a plan C. Because what if something happens and you flee? You need to be able to have your the only thing that you can take with you is your education, right? Not your land, not your house, not your wealth, right? Yeah, not even your gold if you buy gold bars. So the education is very important. That kind of constant hectoring is because of my experience. So it's not possible, even if you say you're not going to impart Vietnam to them, because your choices are based on your experience, even if you're not consciously doing it. Right? And so even though I don't consciously do it, she has that. I think she is somewhat in between.
I think know when they will decide to explore that part too. I mean,
they may decide on their own.
The idea of a dialogue.
Oh, very open, because they start asking now, right? Especially because we did the book. And also I think that because I am not like my parents who said Iron Curtain, I'm very open, and therefore we have a lot of fights. I think that fights are not, they seem horrible when they happen because you feel like, oh my God, this is a rupture. But in fact, I would prefer that than having just a kind of coexistence, being past each other, right? I remember when I met David. Yeah, he said, there's no normal people. Normal people are only people you don't know. I was very struck by that, because I think once you start really knowing somebody and have fights with them, you know, then you really become close to them, as long as you can move beyond the fight and reconstruct, right? And I feel like she and I have had a lot of fights, especially triggered from the book. But even before the book, I've always encouraged her to be, quote, impertinent. I never taught her to be obedient.
I think our parents never talked about the war. It was just too painful for them. But I think this generation is really open to their children and really allowing them to explore and share their stories to their children.
Also, you know, our parents, when they came, the roles were very reversed. But, you know, like the parents became lower ranking because when you go out in public, they couldn't speak English. And yeah, and you actually saw the way people treated them. When you speak English with, the exception is British and French accent, but if you speak English with an Asian accent, right, or a Spanish accent, people talk to you as if you are dumb. Like they go like, oh, yeah, they treat you like somehow you're less than. When in fact, the reason why you speak English with an accent is because you are multilingual, right? So it's actually a positive thing. But so when you go out in public at that time in 1975, where nobody wanted to deal with Vietnam, okay? Much less Vietnamese. They don't want to deal with vets, American vets. They don't want to deal with Vietnamese. You have a Vietnamese parent go out, the bank teller talk to them like you know nothing. So you're looking at your parents having no pride of place in public. You go back home. Are you not going to be affected by that? I think most children are going to be. So you're still showing them respect, but inside you're thinking, well, I know more than you because I speak better English. And you feel ashamed that you feel that, right? So therefore, they're not, so in other words, their relationship with us, with the older generation, with my generation and yours, is different than mine and our children. Because regardless, we are able to function in the mainstream much better than our parents were. So that affects how we deal with our children, because we have more authority. So they not only didn't talk, they felt less than. And I think that's very hard for Vietnamese parents, to lose face with their children in public. Especially in 1975, it was very raw. 1975 is a very raw time.
Yeah, so can I put you on the spot, Mr. Tom Valley? We have Mr. Tom Valley here today.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was told, don't buy a vein yet.
But you've
James' question is great, but
it was a very good question, but we have you here today, who you are a Vietnam vet, and you came back, and you have come back to many times to Vietnam to help with U.S. Vietnam relations and also to build Fulbright University. I'd love to get your perspective, especially for this generation of Vietnamese Americans, and I think we're all supporters of the work that you're doing in Fulbright. But I'd love to get some thoughts and perspectives.
well, first, thank you for asking. I took pretty careful notes about what you said in your talk. I'm still working on what I think, but my first thought is it's very impressive when you went to the library with your father, dropped you off at the library. You certainly learned a great deal about proof rock and the wasteland and T.S. Eliot and James Joyce, and you have I'm glad you read those books, right? When you went to the library, those are sort of important books, right? And that's what Fulbright University is trying to do in Vietnam is create the idea that someone would know who proof rock was, someone would know who what the wasteland was about, or what the portrait of an artist of a young man was about. We're trying to do that in Vietnam. We're trying to transcend what doesn't exist there now into that space. And I was saying to Lan beforehand, we can find someone to teach Shakespeare. We're having trouble finding someone to teach artificial intelligence. But it's like the split with your daughter. The kids want to learn artificial intelligence. They don't want to learn about Vietnamese studies or proof rock. So we're trying to navigate that space. But I think the main thing I took away from your presentation, which I enjoyed thoroughly, is this whole very, very large idea of delusion. And delusion is the problem, right? And I think part of Ving's question is getting at how do you get out of the delusion? How do you find and how do you navigate your way out of the delusion that you get yourself into? And I think when you went to the library as a young woman, because you had no friends, right? It would be hard to read a book about your experience. It'd be hard to read a book about the real history of the South Vietnamese forces, the South Vietnamese Army. So one of the things we should do in the study of Vietnam, and I know we have some people in here that are sort of trying to get the right archival material for what happened in the war. We still need more information about what happened historically, because delusion's still a problem.
They've not talked. You try to get them to talk, they don't.
Yeah, but that's a delusion. Delusion is still a problem, and so I'm glad you have this experience, and it's been great. And what we're trying to do at Fulbright University is sort of both learn what you learned, but try to understand the delusion. So thank you very much.
Well, we're going to wrap this up. This has been an amazing, and it's an ongoing dialogue. I don't think there are answers, but I think we need to talk about it. Can you hear me? Okay. And this generation is doing that. And I'm really proud of that. We're going to have Tony Bui's film and screening, I think is it 3:30? 3, which is coming up. So I'm looking forward to seeing you there, and then afterwards reception. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.